It is about time I go across and find the founder and publisher of the Guyana Observer. He is a broadcaster himself. He is an astute observer of the politics of not only his country, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, but of the world. And I also had the pleasure of working with him. His name is Mark Benschop. Mr. Benschop, good morning to you, sir.
Hi, good morning, Rennie. Good morning to all of your listeners. And I've observed that you have lowered your tone when you said I've had the pleasure of working with him. Let me say this.
No, I had the pleasure of working with this gentleman.
Thank you, but let me say that you were on top of the list of some of the best bosses that I've ever had. I just want to say it's always a pleasure working with you, under you, that is.
I'm happy to take that compliment this morning because I know you no longer work for me, so I don't have to worry about it being an overture for a raise.
Well, I've realized that only a couple of times after you've contacted me, hey, Benschop, I want you to come on this program. I realized that I no longer work for you, and I could have said no. But, sorry.
Mark, it's great to hear your voice this morning, my brother. Something happened in the Cooperative Republic hometown yesterday where there was a prison disturbance, I believe it was, and some shooting took place. Tell us about what's happening in the prison across here. This is on the heels of what happened just 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago.
Oh gosh, it's on the heels of a lot of things that have been happening in the prisons. And as you know, I speak from a position of experience because I've spent 5 years in solitary confinement there as a political prisoner. Mm-hmm. And I can say, without any apologies, that I know of the system inside out. Hence, when I say something, it's from a position of strength and experience. Mm-hmm. Now, we have had last year a portion of the prison burnt. 18 prisoners burnt to death. We have had probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the entire Camp Street prison burnt. Several prisoners escaped. One prison officer died. Several injured. 1 week following that incident, horrific incident that is, 13 other prisoners escaped from where they were being housed, which is considered a pasture, where you send cows and sheep and goats to graze. That's where hundreds of prisoners were. 13 of those prisoners escaped. I believe most of them have been recaptured. And as of yesterday now, they started up again. They're saying, look, the conditions are atrocious. We need better treatment. Not because we're prisoners, we need better treatment. I believe that's exactly what the prisoners were saying. Things, according to the prison authority, that's according to them, and the police force, things got out of hand, and they were forced to shoot 16 prisoners with pellet bullets and rubber bullets. That's according to them, pellet and rubber bullets. Several of those prisoners are injured. I believe about 4 or 5 are currently nursing wounds at the Georgetown Public Hospital.
This is primarily because, one of the reasons, I mean it's not the only one, but primarily because of overcrowding, is that correct?
Yeah, but that has been an issue for years now. Even during my time there, people have been calling for speedy trial. They have had prisoners in there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years without a trial. They have had prisoners in there. For example, the Camp Street prison was built for about 400 prisoners. To date, they have, up until when it was burnt down, they had over 1,300 prisoners. There were prisoners who were sleeping in the bathroom. There were 3 or 4 prisoners sleeping on a thin mattress, a very small mattress, and so forth. So these are issues that have been lingering around for many, many years. And it's something that I've pointed out to those in authority, that is a boiling pot, and you guys have to look after that interest. Look into that. They haven't been looking into it for years, and hence the problem we have today.
My guest twice this morning referred to him having spent time in the prison system. Mark worked for me in New York, but then he left and he went back to the Cooperative Republic to get changes. And those changes, in advocating for those changes, ran into a problem with the then President Barack Jack Deo, who took on his case personally. And Mark was sentenced. He was in jail for a 5-year 5-year stint. During that stint, we often spoke with him in prison. And back then, he complained about the conditions. So that is the reason why I reached out again for him this morning, being an authority in that area. Do you believe this is going to bring about some changes in what you've been complaining about for 5 years and led to this to this situation, including the one that happened 2 days ago?
I'm not sure that, because I've reached out to some of those in authority, not necessarily the previous administration, but I know the current Minister of Home Affairs or Minister of National Security, and oftentimes I would say that there is a serious problem within the prison, and if not addressed, then you're going to agitate prisoners, that they should be properly reformed, they should spend their time there rehabilitating, and at the same time, not all of those prisoners are guilty. A lot of them are on trumped-up charges. A lot of them are in there for minor offenses, like a little spliff or thieving a mango and these sort of things. You have instances where convicted prisoners are housed in the same division with prisoners on remand, prisoners awaiting trial, and all these sort of things. So the problem has been rather major, and it is my opinion that it has not been looked into how it ought to have been. Hence the situation today. And because the prisoners continue to stand up and say, hey, we are prisoners, we have rights too, which is true. If someone is accused of a crime and sent to prison, it doesn't mean that individual is guilty. In my situation, I have spent my 5 years there on a trumped-up treason charge by the previous administration, who claimed that I attempted to overthrow them. There was no evidence leading up to that, but that's what they woke up one morning and said, look, we're going to charge you for treason, and we're going to put you behind bars. We're going to lock you up in solitary confinement. And I say this because there are lots of other prisoners in there, maybe not political prisoners, as I was, but they're prisoners who have been raw deal, so to speak, who have been given a trumped-up charge.
We have
they're prisoners who live miles away, who only get to go to the magistrate's court every 3 months. So there are serious problems there, and as much as I've been saying to those in authority, look into these problems, address these problems. Otherwise, we weren't going to get a prison burned down. We weren't going to get prisoners escaping and so forth. At least not in the magnitude that we're seeing currently.
I wanted to put the focus on that this morning because in Trinidad and Tobago, as you know, we had one prison break a couple of years ago, but we do have repeatedly the discussion of overcrowding in remand. And I keep reminding folks, if you're in remand, it means that you are not guilty. You are arrested until you have your day in court. And that is very instructive for us to look at. I know when you are a broadcaster and in the Court of Republic, it was very difficult for you to, I'm getting some noise coming up there. It was difficult for you to say what you had to say with the new government of Mr. Granger. You were there during the period of Barack Jack Deo. This new period of the new president, Mr. Granger, has things changed in the cooperative republic, and we need to know this because it's a Caribbean. It is one of our CARICOM neighbors. This is one of those who have accepted the Caribbean Court of Justice. Has much changed?
I listened to a portion of that song that you're playing, that we must come together.
Yes, come let's build a nation together, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's what's needed right now in Guyana, not just Guyana, but the Caribbean. But to answer your question with regards to the current administration, there are some glitches, there are some problems, and I'm hoping that they are going to be addressed. It is a bit too young in terms of the administration, just a little over 2 years, to compare them with the many atrocities under the 23 years of the PPP government.
Yes.
So I'm going to go a little light with that in that regards to this new administration. Maybe if you ask me that question another year and a half or 2 years, I'll be able to say point blank X, Y, or Z. But for now, like I've said, there are some mistakes being made.
Yes.
And when I constructively say this to the president, that you need to address these mistakes, you need to address them at least expeditiously. For example, you cannot have a Minister of Home Affairs or National Security who, under his watch, you've had 18 prisoners burned to death in prison.
Yes.
You've had a prison burned down. You've had dozens of prisoners escaped. And to say that you're not going to ask him to resign, I think that has become rather questionable. And I have called on social media and other places for the immediate resignation of the current Minister of National Security.
You heard me chuckle when you mentioned it was too early to judge this government of President Granger, and I chuckled because we are in a mirror situation in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a government that came in 2015 and is under 2 years, and it's what I say all the time. While some folks may think that I am an apologist for positions, I am not. I just know that the wheels of state takes a long time sometimes to turn, and as one of my guests said here this morning, which was the Minister Coburn, made the point, you've got to get legislation in place to change things. It is one thing, for the general citizenry to say, I want this change and this must change, and it's time to approach this, and you knew about it all the time. But if you don't have the legislative framework for it, what are you going to do but complain?
Well, that is true. There are some things that, and no one has ever called me an apologist. In fact, they know that I go after regimes.
Oh, yeah,
and it doesn't matter to me who is in power. Mr. Granger, the president of Guyana, he has been my neighbor. He's a good friend of mine, but I don't mess around when it comes to saying it as it is. And if I'm saying to the president that you have to get rid of you have to remove your Minister of National Security because he has been proven to be incompetent. 18 prisoners died under his watch. A prison burnt down. Over 20 prisoners escaped, and you're saying you're not going to have him submit his resignation? If you check today's Stabrook News, the Guyana newspaper there, the editorial is calling for his resignation, the Minister of National Security, that is. A letter by a prominent senior counsel, Mr. Pollard, is calling for his resignation. Isn't it time that he resign? We don't need policies or legislations in place for that. The prison has been a burning issue for years now. What is there to correct legislation to say we should call for speedy trial for prisoners? I don't know. Some things seem to be wrong, but like I've said, it's too early to judge them in a manner of which I've totally condemned the previous administration. But this administration is just a little over 2 months, and I'm going to give them a little time to get their act together. But there are some signs that I'm seeing these signs, and it's not looking nice.
2 years, but still observing. Mark, I've got to conclude this, but just before I do this, I do want to ask you something, because usually what happens, is something hits the headlines and then it disappears. I remember the police, the constabulary in Guyana calling in members of the opposition because they had questions as to land sale and so on. What has happened with that? Those people they called in, it's important because it included the past president and a number of people of his administration. What has happened with that?
Rennie, and to your listeners, if I had to choose another profession, maybe in my lifetime, maybe I'll become a kaiso. Right? I'll sing kaiso. Right?
Why is that?
And I'll sing a kaiso, as you Trinidadians, my good friends in Trinidad would say kaiso.
Yes.
I will respond to that question in a form of a kaiso, and it will probably go like this. Things come up in the newspapers. One day it disappear, another day another thing pop up. Anyways, I'll stick to my.
I think you better stick to the publisher side of it.
It just disappeared, and I do believe a lot of your famous past Kayaso or Calypsonians like Pretend and all the other great ones, they would be probably happy to answer that question in a political context.
Yeah, that's a good thing about that's a good thing about a good Kaiso. It's a whole commentary, man.
Oh gosh, I love Kaiso. I love Kaiso. But Rennie, I know you said time to conclude. And for those who have been calling you, as you said, I've never heard that, but have addressed you as an apologist. I'd like to say that even if you're an apologist for good reasons. You're an apologist for your people. The tremendous sacrifices and the balance in your reporting, I think, says a lot. So, I don't know. I just don't know. I'm surprised that people would even want to call somebody like you an apologist.
I just said because sometimes you say something and folks think that you're taking a position. At the end of the day, there is, as in your case, you have to understand that the wheels turn slow on some things. And if you observe enough and if you travel enough, you understand that in the big countries, of the world, things take a very long time to change. Or
but you know what I say? That is true. That is true too, Rennie. But you know what I oftentimes say to some people who ask for time? I say, Guyana, our population is 750,000 people.
Yeah.
And that has been the population since I was a little boy growing up in the 70s.
Yep.
Right? 750. I have a 17-year-old son now, and he says to me, Dad, Guyana's population is 750,000. We haven't moved not even one. Right? I say to that in such a small populated country that it shouldn't, and I say this, it shouldn't take long for the wheels to start turning. It really shouldn't.
Give it in this hand, he just took it back. And one good thing, though, Guyana is, they have accepted the CCJ as the final court of appeal. And a country like Trinidad and Tobago, I wonder what is holding us up, because we really need to do that here, too.
Maybe you guys need to do a lot of other things there too. But like you said, you just had a government a little approaching 2 years now, and I don't want to ruffle feathers there to be called an apologist.
Yeah, because you got some friends up in Laventille, and you know what's going to happen. They're going to stop you from coming here, so chill out.
Exactly.
Mark Benschop, my brother, I thank you so very much for taking the time to be with me this morning. Any further concern about that situation as it relates to Guyanese, a number of them, just like Trinidadians, the Trinbagonians, like all Caribbean people in New York City, concerned about the message that came from President Donald Trump to the police up there, where he said, don't be gentle with them when you arrest them, throw them into the paddy wagon. And I say that because, as we know, because of the immigration tenor that has been set, police are moving very rough on people for the most minor of offenses, including jumping a turnstile, which is getting away from paying your subway fare and stuff like that. Any concern in the Guyanese community as to the tenor of that message that was delivered by Mr. Trump, and how it will affect your nationals in New York City, specifically where he did this message?
There are always concerns with anything emanating out of the mouth of that individual, and thank you. And I'd say this, that the police chiefs, a lot of them around the U.S. have addressed that issue, and I don't think much that that individual says at all. One morning, I just heard, my son. He said my 5-year-old. He said he was watching TV. He was watching cartoon, actually, and when I popped into his room to look what he was watching at, he was actually watching a press conference with Mr. Trump, and he called it cartoon.
This is a wonderful place for departure, Mark.
I know. Thank you so much.
Mark, let me save you from yourself. This is a wonderful place for departure.
Yeah. You save me, man. Save me, please.
Mark Benschop.
Before you go, Rennie,
yes, brother.
I don't know if you read the story that J. Edgar Hoover might very well be black, might have been black.
Mr. Hoover is the former head of the FBI. But just have you know, there have been many rumors as to his way of life, and now you're telling me that there are rumors about his ancestry?
I think it was in yesterday's Washington Post as well. So I think he was a brother.
Until I look at it, I have nothing to say. And I have nothing to say. You know why I have nothing to say? Because that brother had a huge file on Malcolm and Martin. He had a huge file on everybody, but he had huge files dedicated to destroying Martin Luther King, and a lot of files with the same thing for Malcolm X.
Oh gosh, I know that.
As a friend of mine said to me one time, "No, we don't want him as a brother." keep that.
Thank you so much.
Mark Benschop, thank you so much.
Let's end on that note, and let's await the next resignation from the White House.
Oh, that's probably going to be tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, man. Thank you so much.